item was that the Active Travel England is now a statutory consultee. Emails have gone out to from the Chief Planner of England. Imagine having that as your job title, telling them that Active Travel England is now a statutory consultee and needs to be part of having an operational role in planning. So road shows with developers are being planned to talk about that. Active Travel Fund, item 3, Active Travel Fund 4 apparently will not now be a multi-year settlement, but the point is that, quote again from Jessie Norman, that the point is to make sure that the money invested is spent as wisely as possible. So what I took from that is that effectively just holding on to your money at the moment is good. Fourth point, really exciting, that news of a new tool, a propensity to cycle tool, apparently being launched with Department for Education, which I think lots of people on these sessions working on school streets and that sort of thing. So that sounded really exciting. Another point that Active Travel England working closely with Highways, the Highways Agency, to draw up a joint framework. And I think, again, reading between the lines, you know, they've got lots of money. Active Travel England wants to make sure that that money is spent on active travel schemes as well as roads. It sounded like that the council ratings will not be released. That was a question that was specifically asked. So the ratings that councils had to give themselves. And a final point, there were lots of others, but final point that I picked out was that the side road zebras, which is a trial set of schemes that Manchester have piloted, and Chris Boardman in particular is pushing for, and Brian Deegan. These are zebra crossings to put across side roads. Apparently the quote from Jessie Norman was that we take the point about studies in Manchester and elsewhere, and but we have some advice that they're difficult to do nationally, so it needs further active investigations, which sounds a bit of a blow because that seems like a bit of a no-brainer. So those are just some headlights. Adam Reynolds, who's on the call, I think tweeted a really useful thread, so again perhaps someone can paste that in the chat. And at this point, I'll hand over to others to share their news. Oh, in fact, there is Adam.
Yeah, hi there. Yeah, I'll post the tweet in there rather than talk about it. But I would say that ATF4, the interesting thing was Active Travel Fund 3 was very strict in what it could be spent on. But it sounds like with Active Travel 4, they're allowing things like links to be built to National Cycle Network, etc., and a much more rural focus. So yeah, even things like heritage. There was a long discussion about heritage rail networks, infrastructure, and bringing those up to spec. So, and I know in the past, Active Travel England were very adamant that it had to be reallocation of road space. So it seems to be a broader remit that they're beginning to bring in. The other thing I thought was quite interesting about that video conference, I'll post my tweet about it, was they also said the purpose of Active Travel England is going to be much less about cycling and focusing much more on walking and wheeling, and saying that there's a very strong sort of symbiotic relationship between the three, and that they're going to be focusing a lot of work this year on that. The other thing, the only reason I raised my hand was somebody at the ONS, the census people, released a rather cool tool. If you've ever lived in a local authority, like for example Bath and North East Somerset, you have the city of Bath, which is 29 square kilometres, surrounded by North East Somerset, which is another 320 square kilometres of space. Yeah, but when you start looking at stats, they basically say, oh, we look at Bath and North East Somerset and tell you that 2% of people cycle or whatever. This tool now allows you to do boundaries, and you can actually draw polygons and shapes that you want. So you can look at, say, your not quite your street, because you have to have a certain level, but you should be able to draw different shapes that you want and different areas that you specifically want to talk about, and look at the number of houses with car ownership. I would advise you against using travel to work data, because the census was taken during a lockdown. People were told to work from home. They were told to avoid public transport if they could. So anyway, so that's my end. That's it.
Thanks, Adam. And I just posted that link to that tool in the chat, because you shared that earlier. It's really interesting. Ruth, and then Carolyn.
Hi, I'm using an iPad. I don't know how to use it. Thanks, Claire, for the breakdown. I watched half of the APPG thing. One of the problems is that the sound from the questioners is quite tricky unless they're in the front row. It was awesome to see Ben Bradshaw there, although sadly he's standing down, and Lord Young, who was the very first kind of known to us older people cycling MPs from Acton. I think one of the biggest problems that came out to me is that although they are giving funding to councils, there's still no mandate that councils will follow it through. So as we know from the Royal Borough of Kensington, Chelsea, they can be given the money, they can be given the thing to do it, but they can randomly choose to pull safe cycle infrastructure out. So what we don't have anywhere in any of what Jessie Norman was saying is any kind of mandation top down. I don't know how to say the right word. And that is the problem. Hounslow had very good councils that will listen and has taken it on. People who have councils like York, like Harrogate, who won't take it on, they still have the same problem, money or not. And the planning thing is fantastic, but unfortunately a huge number of estates are being built without that in place already, and you know, then we're 5 years. Hate to be negative, half full, half empty, half full, but it's really important that we carry on campaigning, really, whatever Jessie Norman says. Thank you.
Thanks, Ruth. Carolyn.
Hi folks, yeah, I just wanted to let you know that we've got the launch of our car-free visions coming up. Bristol will be on next Monday, 23rd of January. I can share a link in the chat if anybody's based in Bristol would like to book. I'm not sure if Zoe, who's here, is maybe one of the speakers at the event. And then the car-free vision for Tooting, that will be launched on the 30th of Jan in Tooting. People will be really welcome to come along to that. So these are visions that have been created with local residents. So there'll be a sort of before and after picture. There'll be lots of stuff going out on social media, a right to counsellor tool that people can use to sort of lobby their councillors for more changes. For the Tooting one, we had Isabel from Wheels for Wellbeing as one of the experts we interviewed. She was also involved in the workshops, and she's going to be speaking on the panel along with councillors Claire Fraser and Joe Rigby. And some of the participants, and we'll have a billboard going up. Also the same for Birmingham. I think Leeds is the 2nd of Feb and Birmingham is the 3rd of Feb. So those will be publicised soon on social media as well. So please come along if you're interested in it, if you're in any of those cities. We've also got a report coming out that we've done with Active Travel Academy about low traffic neighbourhoods this Thursday. Which is a sort of meta study that basically shows the success of low traffic neighbourhoods in reducing traffic. So keep an eye out for that. And we've got, I think, some press interest in that already. So it basically shows that within low traffic neighbourhoods, there's a substantial fall in traffic, almost 10 times higher than the average increases in motor traffic on the boundary road. So it basically suggests that LTNs are contributing to a big drop. And just one other thing, in case it's of interest, Fair City launched their Cleaner Air Market report following the market that they did, looking at supporting markets to use more sort of active and sustainable travel methods. I'll pop a link to that in the chat as well. And I'll also come back in Feb to show you the visions if you're interested, after they've been launched, the car-free visions. Thanks.
Amazing roundup, and that report with the Active Travel Academy sounds just what we need. Really good to get this kind of evidence out. So thanks a lot for that, Carolyn. Bob, I'll just take you off mute there, Bob.
Yeah, 3 little things. Firstly, the Norman meeting. I wasn't that impressed as much as some people were, but anyway, you can look at what Claire's been saying, what Adam was saying in his thread. The second thing is the Lambeth curbside guidance, which we've mentioned that's going to be big news. I mentioned it last week. Third thing is it's covered in The Guardian by Peter Walker today, and everybody's gone apeshit about it on Twitter, is research by Ian Walker, who's now professor in Swansea. He's been coming along and speaking to us, and it's about motor normativity, and it's definitely a must read. I also have a thought for today, if Claire wants to let me share it at the end of the news or whenever. That's it.
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, if someone could post that, the thread from Ian Walker, it's really interesting, links to his research, and I hope we can try and get him on to talk about it. Right, if there is no more...
I can't put my hand up because I'm co-host.
Oh, sorry, Sally, over to you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in Newcastle, we got another school street which launched on Monday, and as far as I know, that's gone well. So that's the third street now. It's in a historic low traffic neighbourhood, and actually all the streets around it are already historic place streets, so they already have restrictions but are not observed at all. So it's really, really good. Pleased to see that.
Fab. And Adam's just squeaked in there for the last news update. Well, we've got a bit more time, so if anyone has got anything else, there's time. Adam.
Yeah, hi. There's a few little bits of news, but the main one that I'm going to mention is that in the whole of West Sussex, we are getting our first school streets. They're going to do a pilot project of 5 school streets across the whole of the county. Hopefully one in Shoreham, it's looking like, but that's big news for West Sussex, who rated themselves as 1. I've heard a rumour they might have been downgraded to 0. And they were also punished by Department for Transport and not allowed to bid for Active Travel Fund 3, and they were taken to court by Cycling UK. So for West Sussex, that feels like a bit of a win for us, but we're still pushing away and trying to ask for more. Please, sir.
Well, I think we need a big round of applause for West Sussex there. And looks like Tim's got something from Leicester as well.
Just very quickly, I realise Sally's on the call and she likes Play Street. So Andy's presentation in Australia at the Micromobility Conference, the first slide has him as a toddler on a bike because he was born in a Play Street in Middlesbrough. There were 100 or so. So I've put the link to the talk in the chat. And it's worth having a look at. It's if you want to know what's happening in Leicester over the last 10 years. And just on the school street business, yeah, they were trying to do one of our safer streets, healthier neighbourhoods schemes. A consultation led to the police arriving due to people raging in the street. It's been wound down to quite a short period of time and a short length of street. But guess what? The 90-year-olds who live in the street quite like the traffic-free street during school hours. So there you go. It's all in the Mercury. See you later.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, well, there's time at the end. So if people think of things or if they crop up, do put them in the chat, and we will hopefully have tiny bit of time at the end. But I think now is probably the time when it'd be good to bring in Carla Francome, who is hopefully many of you will be familiar with her. She's London Cycle Campaigner of the Year for 2022, along with someone else. It was a joint award. So Carla and I are going to do this as a bit of a Q&A kind of double act. I've got some slides that I'm going to share. So I'm going to share my screen now. But Carla, if you want to introduce yourself to start with.
Yeah, hi everyone. I can see all your faces. I recognise those of you from Twitter. I hope that was all really useful and informative. So I'm not sure how useful this will be. It's mainly going to be jokes, so nonsense. I hope that's all right. But we're going to start, I think, with the video. I think Claire, you wanted to start with the petrol station video, but I'm going to do a bit of narrating, hopefully, in case people have seen it before. But I just wanted to say, first of all, that yeah, I used to cycle loads and stuff, and then I had kids and I didn't so much, but I'd started getting into thinking a lot about, I'll tell you actually quickly first, because I went to Guernsey. My husband's from Guernsey, and the whole of the town centre of Guernsey is pedestrianised, like 20 streets. And it was at a time when my kids were really young. They were like 2 and 4, and just the relief of the fact that they could just run around. And it was this moment, this revelation of like, oh my God, I don't have to worry, they're going to die just walking around. And it was this complete like, oh my God, like I'd always like, you know, thought about play streets and stuff, but it was this moment when and then I was like looking around the whole town centre and thinking, they make this work. You know, and I think you could allow deliveries between sort of 8 and 9 in the morning or something, but it kind of really, I think particularly because my kids were at that toddler age and they just ran free and they loved it, and I loved it, and so that was kind of a moment. And then later so I started doing videos and stuff, and then later in that summer I think we had the petrol station crisis,
which is what I thought would be a great introduction to Carla. So I'm gonna play the video now, and if any of you haven't come across Carla on Twitter, this is a good introduction, but also I think it's a great talking point. So I'm going to play it. Carla's going to talk over it. We hope this works technically. So this is in Bounds Green where you live, is that right?
This is Bounds Green, yeah. And this was our kids' walk to school. We couldn't walk.
Pavement! This is a pavement!
This is the fuel shortage in 2021.
Madam. Here she goes.
Everyone's queuing for petrol.
We'll get through that bit.
My neighbour Sally.
And what's worse is that I'm right. Just wait here then, just wait here.
I can't tell you how mad it was. It was like this for 10 days.
Can you back up? Wait, don't have a crash.
I mean, God knows what I'm wearing, but we won't get into that.
Ridiculous, Sally. Yeah. Hiya. In the pavement. Hiya. Is this your car?
No, it's not.
This is a pavement as well. You know, we're trying to walk on this street as well. Bit of a space here.
I'd rather filming this, by the way.
It's a pavement. Just
I need to get to that.
Move on through.
Oh, I let someone through then, by the way. That person pushed in.
Oh no, they pushed in. They pushed in. That's achieving a lot, isn't it?
Oh,
What's happened?
She's going to the wrong way. That's not her place.
What?
Tell him to move from there. There's no turning.
Oh, quick.
You're meant to go down there. Literally, come on. Fucking ridiculous. What's she doing?
What's happened?
She blocked the pavement.
She blocked the pavement.
Yeah, that's the one.
Oh, quick.
My brother's laughing.
Scrap driving. I don't want to give them any favours.
Okay, sorry about that. Good luck, boss. Good luck. Pavement as well. Pavement as well.
So there we are. Now, Carla, when I was talking to you, the whole video made a lot of sense when you told me about your background in, well, I'll let you share, but.
Yeah, so my dad's a clown. My dad, Colin the Clown, he's called. He's a professor, university lecturer, but he used to always juggle the whole London Marathon. He was in a Mars advert in 1984. And he bullied us all into being clowns, whether we wanted to or not. I think he paid us to learn to juggle. So I used to do stilt walking and balloons and stuff. And then me and my mum used to do clown shows as the Clumsy Clots, which was very embarrassing when I was a teenager. So my uncle's a clown and my auntie, so it's kind of a whole family thing. So I guess we just got into making idiots of ourselves and not taking life too seriously. That's always been a big thing with my dad. In fact, yeah, so I think that's just sort of, it's just, I guess I spent about 10 years as a clown. So I guess that sort of comes out, I guess, randomly. You don't really think about it, but there's an element of not being embarrassed and allowing yourself to make a fool of yourself. Have I got a clown car? No. Yeah, the wheels fell off. Changed it to a bike. But watching that back now, I mean, God, it's quite dangerous, isn't it? I mean, afterwards, people were like, why didn't you wear high vis? I mean, genuinely, we could have got stabbed. But I think it just shows so well, doesn't it? Like how angry people get in there, and they lose all sense of reality, like the way those people were shouting. And I think humour's quite a good way of diffusing it, which is actually quite true generally, I think.
So I was going to ask you, I mean, I guess clowning is essentially, it's physical comedy, isn't it? Using your body. And in that clip, and you've done it in other ways, you know, you do put yourself in potentially dangerous situations, and perhaps how have you sort of moderated things as over perhaps the last 18 months after doing more of this, or have you, you know, in terms of kind of thinking about safety and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I guess I haven't so much really. I mean, and we'll talk more specifically about locally and as a safety, but no, yeah, I guess it's just who I am. But it's interesting watching that clip back, because I just think I'm not perfect. I'm not a size 8 or anything. You know, I wear a stupid rucksack, pink shorts, but you know, there's just life, isn't it? And I've never taken myself too seriously. And actually it's quite interesting, because what all the people who are against me try and do is try and insult me and bring me down by saying I'm fat. So I get this all the time. Oh, you're fat, you're this, you're that. And I just think, well, yeah, I'm not a size 10, am I? It's like, but it's fine. Like, you know, and I think being confident with who you are is quite important. And I think they hate that. Sometimes people hate that. And that's how they try and like bring me down. It's not going to work because I'm there wearing stupid pink shorts.
Quite often you respond to Twitter spats, whatever, deliberately with humour, don't you? And when you said that to me, it made a lot of sense. So how, like, what's your sort of advice to other people for kind of how to do that and do it well, I suppose?
Well, and Adam's just mentioned something actually, just to quickly, I have got a t-shirt made saying chunky bitch. One thing I think is to try and own it. We'll always put it back out there if you can. Like I had a driver close past me and then call me a chunky bitch, but I told him he was fat back. But then the best thing was I got away and he was stuck in a traffic jam because I cycled off, and then I went back to have a go at him again, and then I cycled off again, so I won. What's the best? I think I try not to, what do I do? Screenshot everything so you can keep it, so you've got it, a record of it, I think is always really important. And try not to take it too seriously, and just know that they're just trying to get you down, like everyone says, and everyone's brilliant on Twitter. If you get personal attacks, they're just trying to get you down, you know. And try not to get, it does get to me sometimes actually, when people are telling me I'm fat all the time. You think, oh, but you've got to really try not to let it get to you, I think.
And then the last thing we were going to talk about from that clip was, you know, the fact that you filmed that at all. And I think it was just on a phone and your brother filmed it, and just, you know, the importance of, just recording things in your neighbourhood. So do you want to talk to that?
Yes, yeah. So I've worked in TV for 20 years, I think. Oh, thank you. And one thing I think we learned in telly, I was actually making a show on Katie Price. Does anyone remember Katie Price?
Oh,
Somebody said something that happened that wasn't filmed. You never do this. They went, oh, something really funny happened. And someone went, did you film it? And they went, no. And it was like, so basically I always take photos of everything, whether it's a little lump in the road, or I just think you've got to get a visual on it. And that makes it really relatable. So whatever it is, I try and take photos of it. And I think that helps, because if I just say, oh, Green Lanes is a nightmare, no one knows. As soon as you show a photo. And I think often it's about timing, and I've always just got to have my phone there, because you'll see someone run down the middle of the road and you've only got 2 seconds to give quick snap, you know. Or and even when I'm cycling, I'm always looking for that moment when it's the worst, right? Because when you get the moment when it's the worst, you're kind of like, yes, because you can really show it, you know. So ironically, those are the bits you want, because you just want to really demonstrate how terrible it can be. So I've always got my phone quickly to hand.
Cool. And there's a few questions coming in the chat, and it looks like you're handling them as you go. Shall I pop the slides back up and we have a look at the
so I would just say, so about a year after campaigning for various things, we got a local low traffic neighbourhood. Have a wait for that, ladies and gents.
Let's have a look at it. Oh, hang on, sorry, slow off the mark there. There we go. No, don't want that. We want that. Sorry, there we go.
So here's my daughter walking in the middle of the road. through the planters in a low traffic neighbourhood with my cousin's dog. Dogs like low traffic neighbourhoods too.
And this was one of 3, I think, in Haringey.
Yeah, so
did you know? Yeah, sorry.
So yeah, 3 low traffic neighbourhoods came in Haringey this August. Well, sorry, yeah, so from August to September, I think there was 3. So one in Bounds Green, we were the first one, and then 2 others. So and it was a trial, and it was something that I campaigned for, you know, and we did a lot of campaigning about trying something new. I did a lot of stuff about Cinderella trying her golden slipper. You know, you've got to try it. The man from Del Monte had to try the pineapple to know. So
before all this happened, Carla, did you know about low traffic neighbourhoods and all of that? Or did this kind of come as part of COVID?
I think I knew about it because there was one up the road that caused a lot of rows. So I wasn't sure about it first, but then people suggested it locally, and then I heard about this councillor Mike Haggerty, and he seemed like he had a good plan. Yes. So I did a lot of campaigning for it, and in many ways it's been good. We'll talk about it in detail, but yes, dog walkers. Yeah. Well, I met a woman who's had 2 cats had been killed previously by cars because of the LTN. She decided to get another cat, so that was lovely. So this is me on the planters.
And are we still in 2021 here? Or?
So this is August last year.
Yeah.
So I was very excited about it, and we'll talk more. We can scoot through a bit. I think
Okay.
we've got some people. Here we go. Oh, this is my daughter. Now this was amazing, actually, you know, because it's really hard to hear from kids often. But as soon as my daughter, as soon as she loves cycling, and it wasn't really, you know, I got her cycling, but she loves it. This is very much her thing. I didn't encourage, you know, I didn't make her do it. She loves cycling. My son's not so bothered, but she hated cycling on the pavements, and you can see why. I mean, she just said to me, you know, the pavements are full of crap, you know, people for a start. The pavements are full of people and lampposts and trees, and you know, and she was desperate to cycle on the road, and that wasn't something that I encouraged in her. You know, she just kept saying, when can I cycle on the road? And luckily the LTN was coming in, so I kept emailing the counsellors and saying, my daughter's, you know, come on, she's ready. And so when it started, it was this incredible thing that she could cycle through the neighbourhood. I mean, to be honest, she was slightly disappointed because she thought that the LTN was throughout the whole universe. She told me. So she was a bit annoyed that it was only in our local area. But she, you know, she just kept saying, I love cycling on the road, mummy. And she would sing a song, you know, it would go, and I just remember, it makes me emotional. She was just going, it's a lovely day in the neighbourhood, it's a lovely day in the neighbour. Won't you ride along with me right now? And she just would be singing that as she was cycling along. And, you know, it's this incredible thing to see it happen.
Have you used singing in your
yes, so
disarming methods of campaigning, Carla?
Yes, I think you also. I wanted to talk bit about music, but I might do it later on. But
Okay.
because it's linked to some other stuff. But look, people out on bikes in their pajamas, ladies and gents. Look at that. I mean, on a bike in flip-flops and your pajamas, you know. So that was a happy moment. And a parrot. Now, this is Vera. Vera loves the LTN, incidentally. I don't know if you guys have seen a parrot before who loves an LTN, but she finds traffic, the noise is too much. So Vera was so we've got dogs, parrots, kids, people in pajamas. Yeah, so this is interesting. This is Steve. So one thing I really wanted to do living here was make sure that everyone had an opinion that was valid, and not try and stamp down on other people's opinions. I think it's really important, because the worst thing if you feel angry is someone telling you your opinion, you know, doesn't matter, it's worse. So I thought it was really important that people really express their views and everyone listened to each other. And this was a guy called Steve I met, and he was really interesting because he had really different views. He loved it in some ways. He's worried about climate change, but he drives a van for work and he was worried about that. And he just had a really mixed view, and life is complicated, and I thought it was really interesting. So
because that's something you do quite a lot, isn't it? You know, you want to bring all those different perspectives in, and it's not about 2 binary sides of a discussion.
Exactly. And I think it's easy to say people that like LTNs are right and people that don't like them are wrong. And it's not that simple. I mean, look, I don't have a lot of sympathy for someone who just wants to drive a bit longer, but other people have extremely valid reasons for driving or changing their life slightly. And businesses is the main one. So so yeah, I think it's important. Oh, so yes, I mean, so the thing is that it's a matter of listening to people and also still, you know, trying these schemes, isn't it? Like, that's the thing.
So who put this
This is
poster up?
amazing. I've got to say, I mean, look, that is just a cracking bit of campaigning, isn't it? Whichever way you look at it. You know, I mean, so these were people who are against the low traffic neighbourhood locally. But look at the difference. So that's the original one. I mean, I just loved it. In fact, it rained and then it looked like a Halloween poster. So I did post these because I think it's important locally that people, you know, that we have different opinions come out. And then can't remember what else you've got.
I think that might be the last one. Oh, there we go. That's the last one.
Yeah, so what I was going to say for this is don't try this at home, kids, unless if you're weak-hearted. A big thing I've learned really is that I think I would campaign for other LTNs, but not necessarily on your own doorstep, because it's a big thing to do with your own name and face. And I always wanted to do it with my own name and face. And there's been amazing benefits for this LTN, but it's also been hard for some businesses. And a lot of them have been angry with me because I think they think that I'm the person behind it, even though I'm not. I'm a campaigner. I'm nothing to do with the council. So people have been quite annoyed. So there were points when I couldn't really walk down the high street without people glaring at me. There's cafes that I'm not welcome in anymore. And that hasn't yet resolved. So I actually decided to stop talking about the LTN locally because I was just like my kids were getting upset that they can't go in the local cafes. And I, you know, just walking down the street and having everyone glare at you is horrible. And also, yeah, I mean, people think that I've created this scheme. I've become the figurehead. And now the funny thing is there are a lot of other people who like it, but they don't say. So it looks like it's just me who wants this. And I was very vocal at the beginning. And I'm glad I was, because I said lots of positive things. But the problem is that a lot of people think that I don't care if businesses close. And that's not true. I know a lot of these. I mean, this is what's difficult. I know the businesses around here. I love them. There's a lovely woman who always gives my dad his favourite soup. She doesn't want me in her business anymore. I understand why she doesn't, but that's hard. So I think campaigning right in your own neighbourhood is tricky. But maybe just campaign for the one down or something. Yes. Elsie,
and so is that the main thing you think you would do differently, Carla, is maybe pick one of the other two LTNs that are happening in Haringey?
Maybe it's so hard to say. I mean, I'm glad I said everything I said. It's just been really, I guess I didn't expect businesses to be quite so annoyed or to feel so affected. I don't, you know, I think some of them have been. One thing I would say, I think, is that with businesses, I think that when LTNs are coming in, that council should really work with them a lot more from 3 months in advance, like literally go into each business. I don't know what you will think of this, but go into the businesses, talk to them, talk about where they get their business from, promote them locally. Because I think if you're going to lose 30% of your business, now I know that probably not loads of them drive, but I think some of them did very much drive to Middleton Road from Green Lanes. They would scoot through. So if they are going to lose customers, how are they going to get them? Now that's possible, but it needs some work, and maybe locals rally round, you do a new promotion campaign. But I think that stuff should happen in advance so that when an LTN comes in, people are ready, because it's all very well having a trial, but if someone's worried about their business, you know, and you're saying to them, well, feedback and we might change it in 8 months, they're like, I'm worried about my business now. So like that needs a lot of work, I think. And that's not the council's fault, because, you know, they don't have, well, I mean, you know, they don't necessarily have all the funds. But I do think that if somebody's worried about their business, that's a big thing, you know, especially in a cost of living crisis over winter. So I just think that, you know, that relationship needs to start 3 months before the LTN so that people are ready, rather than bringing it in, you know. But I think, you know, it's probably expensive.
Yeah. So I'm sure lots of people on the call would like the chance to ask questions directly. So we'll open up in a second. One last question from me, Carla, was just about how this does sort of dovetail with your day job, and has one affected the other at all? Are the two parts of your life completely separate, or?
Well, it's interesting you should say that, actually, because I started working on a series a while ago, developing it, and it got commissioned, and I was a bit like, oh goodness, how am I going to work on this big kind of very busy TV series and do the cycling stuff. But actually it turned out my job was in King's Cross, which is about an hour cycle commute for me. So I just thought, oh, suddenly I was like, oh, I can cycle in. So that's why I started doing that. So my cycle commute becomes part of it. I can't tweet too much in case my boss sees, but it's part of my life, and that's what cycling is, isn't it? And when it's best, it is part of your life.
Thank you. So yes, if people would like to ask Carla anything, Ruth's got a hand up, so we'll go to Ruth next. But if anyone else would like to, or if you want to put it in the chat, I can always ask Carla, or I'm sure she will answer it herself because she's pretty switched on to how Zoom works, obviously. So Ruth.
Hey Carla, awesome. Fantastic as always. A couple of things. Therese Petterson, who I think is on this course, very many years ago led a shopping by bike thing that we all did, and we went shopping in Whitechapel, she can confirm, and we had things on our bike saying we'd come by bike, and that was really very good. But just to confirm to you, I was at the Jewish Labour Movement event a couple of weekends ago, and Sem Mimi, who's your LA member, was challenged about the LTNs, and she just said, look, let's be clear, we've declared a climate emergency, it is important, this is what we're going to do. So it's great that you actually do have that kind of top-down confirmation from someone higher than the council and on the GLA LA, and that is clearly what we need. But I just wanted to assure you that she was absolutely clear in her to someone who was complaining, I'm sorry, it is going to happen, and for all the right reasons. So that's what we need, is people in her kind of position to be very positive about it, along with you, obviously.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting. I think it's just quite important that we do take the heat off campaigners, because if you do live locally and everyone suddenly thinks it's you doing this, that's what they think. They say you've pushed the LTN onto us. And it's like, listen, guys, this is a bigger, a campaigner said to me on the phone, this is a Labour policy, this is an election thing. The problem is people are too scared to say, they don't want to say. But I do still think that it's really good to work with businesses a lot in advance to get them ready for this, so that it's not this huge shock.
Thank you. And not on all our shoulders, because there's not that many of us actually. But thank you, Carla.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. And Jill, would you like to come in?
Oh yeah, I've sort of joined a bit late, so I didn't hear the very beginning of it, but I do follow you on Twitter, and I love what you do about what you wear. I know we did the Fancy Women bike ride in Stevenage, and it was a shame you couldn't come, but we still, all good. There's a lady who's on Twitter, and she's in Canada. I think it's Schrodinger Cyclist, and I read something that she wrote about a month before Christmas, and it was about being positive. And if someone says to you, oh, you're really lucky, using her words, if you're really lucky, you can cycle to your childcare. She says, no, I chose my childcare so I can cycle there. And as somebody who genuinely 33 years ago moved to a town that has segregated cycleways, and it is genuinely why I moved here, it made me start thinking about this positivity. Centre Parks adverts over Christmas. I've now got this thing, I'm going to cycle smiling as if I'm in a Centre Parks advert. Middle-class people, they spend thousands to go and live in an LTN for a week. Yeah. And then they go home and get in their car again. Yes. So it's the other thing she does is this sort of an expectation. And I tried it out with cycle parking. So I went to Nando's on Friday night, and I just went in and, like she said to do, flutter my eyelids and say, can you just tell me where the cycle parking is, please? With this sort of assumption it's there, and just this whole normalizing it. And I think that, that's what you're doing, and, it's brilliant. And I just think the more we can do it. So it's just sort of a big thank you really for me for the question. But it's cycle like a Centre Parks advert.
It's great.
Incorporate that in any way.
It's so true. It's so fun. I mean, yesterday I lost a glove on the way into work, on the way from my underground carping up to the office. So I cycled in -5 degrees with no gloves for an hour, but I wasn't even cold because I had so much fun. Well, my hands were numb as well. But it is just really good fun, isn't it? Like, cycling's just really good fun, and it takes us back to feeling like little kids, I think. And that's one of the first joys I had. I can remember, I'm sure you all feel the same, and it's something that brings us back to that. And I think it's really important that we keep, because we're also really annoyed because we need to save our infrastructure. So it's kind of a balance. But I was going to say something else then. I forgot. I know what I was going to say, actually. It's interesting you should say that about choosing. I was just going to say one thing. I realised this weekend, you know, everyone talks about 15-minute cities. We moved my dad around the corner and I can now go and see him. Now, this was a lot of work. He had to sell his house and move locally. I saw loads of mates that live locally. And I just thought, God, we've all accidentally created a 15-minute city without knowing. But how wonderful it is to just be able to walk around your local area. Well, unless they hate you because of the LTN.
Well, we're going to have to move into the next section in a second, but if anyone wants to give Carla any questions in the chat, I know you've got to go soon, Carla, to produce whatever TV show you're producing tonight, but
I've got a really quick question for Carla. Sorry, I can't put my hand up there.
Go for it, Sally.
Quick question. I thought it was really interesting what you said about campaigning locally, and I've experienced that as well. And but the thing that frustrates me is that if you're a local person, you're taken more seriously by councillors usually. And I just wondered whether you had any ideas about how you overcome that if you're campaigning in an area that's not quite so local. Is there something that you do differently to have that kind of same impact?
That's interesting. I mean, actually, I think probably what I'd say is that if you want to campaign, I do think it's really important to campaign locally. I just think it's probably better to do it within a group of people and through an anonymous account. So like we've got some WhatsApp groups with people on locally who, you know, like the LTN and stuff. It's not necessarily so local, but we have got various ones, you know, and I think actually it's just being anonymous maybe is easier on Twitter anyway. But just so that you're there's a group of you, like I think there's power in numbers. So maybe that's it, and having an anonymous account and just trying to get as many different, like there's an account that everyone thinks is me instantly, but isn't. It's a Happy Haringey or something, Haring Heaven, that's it. And they just do loads of different stories. And actually that's quite good for me, because then it's not just me. It's like, oh, look, all these people, and they might want to be anonymous, but I think there is power in numbers. And I think I meet a lot of people who basically say, oh, we don't really want to say. But if people feel that there's loads of you, it's a bit easier, isn't it, than it just being on one person. So yeah, I'd say form groups, be anonymous, and just try and, even if you have to anonymize stories like this, not Haring Heaven does, just try and get as many different people out there so that it doesn't seem like it's just one person. Because loads of people say to me, oh, I love it, I just wouldn't say publicly, you know.
Well, I think the conversation will continue in the chat. I mean, something I found locally, we've got a cycle lane going in right now and street parking being taken out, is going to talk to them face to face without social media, and you know, social media has its own kind of purpose, but actually
yes,
those conversations where, as you say, you don't treat them in a binary way like for and against, but you try and listen and understand. I found
that's really important.
Useful.
Yeah, totally. I've had loads of conversations in real life. And sorry, I don't want to end on a negative, by the way. I just think that it has been a bit tricky locally. And I'm sure I'm going to, like, hopefully I'll be able to go back to the high street soon. But I do think that's really important, talking to people in real life, because you can always sort things out normally, right? When you speak to people. People around here have been really angry, actually. So it has been tricky, and they're worried about their business. But I'm hoping that over time, things will change and that they will feel better.
Brilliant. Well, I think there's a few comments in the chat about business specifically and ideas and things, so I'm really wish we could talk for a bit longer, but we have got another speaker lined up, so perhaps we can do something like this again in the future. So lots of appreciation for you in the chat, and thank you for talking to us.
Thanks for having me. Thanks everyone for listening.
Cool. So I'm going to hand over to Mark now to do the final section, which is his infrastructure spotlight, and I'm looking forward to this. So, Mark, if you're with us.
Hello, I'm with you. No tricorn hat, Carla.
But, are you the real highway? Are you the Ranty Highwayman?
I am.
Never seen your face before. How exciting!
So, hello, at long last.
Hi.
Right, let's. Oh, I can't share my screen at the minute.
I'll just change the. There you go. Try now.
Right, it should be popping up now. There we go. Right, okay. Yeah, I kind of have to apologise, everybody, because after Carla's brilliant presentation, I'm really going to bring the mood down. I do try and keep these quite happy and interesting, but well, this is interesting, but it's also quite bad. So let's get on with this one. So I'm going to have a content warning for this one. So I'm going to talk about terrorism tonight, which is a bit of a dark subject for some people. So if that's something that you're a bit worried about, maybe this is not for you. So I'll give you a couple of seconds just to think about it and maybe just jump off this particular call. I'm not going to show anything nasty, it's just infrastructure, but some of the discussion will talk about attack and defence. I also think I should be saying that the word terrorist itself can be problematic. It's got history behind it, interpretation, politics. And if you want to know more about kind of the rounded subject of terrorism, go and listen to Enemies of the People. It's a really, really good podcast. So that to one side, I shall just go on to the next slide. So this kind of sets the scene for terrorism in my brain, in my experience. So kind of my earliest thing I remember was the Grand Hotel bomb in Brighton, IRA 1984. And there's a quote there from Margaret Thatcher, regardless of what you think about her. It was pretty stark for her, what happened there, and brought it home to her. The IRA at the time said, this time we were unlucky, but we don't have to be lucky once, you have to be lucky always. And that's quite an interesting and quite chilling thing for a group to say, mainly because we probably only hear about the incidents where terrorists have been lucky. So that kind of sets a bit of the scene. And there's lots of stuff that goes in the background. There's people on this call who no doubt have been to similar briefings that I have, that we can't tell you who briefed us or what we heard. And certainly there's things I've been shown that I'm not even allowed to search on the internet. So that kind of sets a bit of a scene here. But I will be controversial in this as I go through. So let's look at some infrastructure with that out the way. So cast your mind back to the mid-1990s. This is Whitehall in Westminster. And what you can see there are some pretty familiar black bollards, but also those Portland stone walls. Now, back in the 90s, somebody was going around Westminster, sticking bollards in everywhere and building these walls. And the bollards in these walls have some absolutely huge foundations. And what these are designed to do is to stop people getting truck bombs up in front of government buildings. So you've got building there, you've got a flimsy fence, but the building in the background, and your target in that particular circumstance is to get a truck bomb very close to that building, detonate it, and it's actually the glass within the building itself at the time people are worried about, because that's what causes injuries. It's the debris, it's the glass and that kind of thing. So if we talk a bit about that, so we've got something called standoff, and the explosives force from something, sorry, did I just skip one? No, I didn't. So explosives force is non-linear with distance, it's inverse cubic for the mathematicians. So for every meter we can keep these bombs away from the potential target, we get this significant reduction in force and damage to property and people. And so around Westminster in the mid-1990s, going to Whitehall, you could place spot the government building, because all of the government buildings had bollards and walls and all this sort of stuff around it. It was fairly simple, very straightforward. Things have got a bit more sophisticated. So if we go to Horseferry Road in Westminster, and we look back at what is now the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, we can place spot the government building, and there it is there with bollards all the way around there, big deep foundations, again designed to keep a truck bomb away from that glass-clad building. Okay, so what you might say, it's there to protect national infrastructure, and that's all fine, no particular problem with that. However, if you wish to cross from the other side back, and ironically, the unprotected building on the other side is the Department for Transport, and if you're crossing here, you've got bollards right through the tactile paving of your crossing. If you are a visually impaired user, the position you're standing to press the button where it says wait there has that bollard right in your walking line. So just kind of hold that thought there. So from the user experience point of view, that's pretty bad engineering. Down the road a bit, Petit France, I think it's the government legal building that's behind. I mean, all this you can find. I'm not telling anybody anything secret here. It's all on Google, what building's what. So crossing Petit France back into St James's Park Station. Here's a zebra crossing, and we've stuck bollards right the way through the middle of them. So that's in everybody's way. There is guidance. So there's 3 notes. This one's probably the one to go and have a quick look at. Local Transport Note 1 of 11, and it talks about vehicle barriers in the streetscape. It's DFT, but also with the Centre for the Protection of National Infrastructure, who are a arm of government who you can't quite pin on where they are and who they work for. They exist. They've got a website. You can go and look at it. You can download these things. It's all very interesting. You know, taking aside what we're talking about from the technical point of view. And what they're talking about is vehicles. So parked vehicles, as I've just said, parked up close to your target. It's getting vehicles through gaps. So if you've got this kind of ring of steel around your building, can they get through a gap somewhere? Can they tailgate another driver going through? Can they take these vehicles and drive them to weakened buildings? Can somebody deceive? So has somebody got a fake Royal Mail vehicle or police vehicle or whatever, and they're taking something through? Have they got somebody under duress trying to get themselves into these sensitive locations? Or, as we've probably seen a lot more recently, vehicles being used as weapons. So again, nothing secret there. Those are tactics used by terrorists. You can go and read this for yourself, and there's more information out there. So we've had, over the last few years, there have been incidents, there has been responses to those. Here's King's Parade in Cambridge, really, really busy for cycling, really busy for tourists through there. The response from whatever threat that somebody's picked up, I'm not saying that it isn't a threat, but this is the response. So we've got these massive concrete and steel blocks. You've got this kind of temporary heavy gate put in there, and the route for two-way cycling is through this really narrow gap. The drainage channel there is cobbles or sets. It's quite uneven. Certainly this weather, slippery, wet. It's not particularly good insulation, but things have been put out quickly as a response. There's all these things now, which is a bit of a set piece, and hopefully at some point this will be upgraded to something which is a bit more people friendly. Westminster Bridge in 2018, these kind of motorway crash barriers or temporary motorway crash barriers were put out very, very quickly in London in response to what happened before there. Not really designed for that situation, but it does the job. It's keeping drivers off the footway. The problem with this was that it was creating this really unsafe barrier for people to cycle up against. Although you've got the bus lane and the cycle lane, you've got a bit of space between there and the general traffic. It was quite a scary place to cycle through with buses coming up next year. So fortunately, that's now been sorted out. That's kind of the permanent situation. So the counter-terrorism brief has been dealt with. Nice new cycle track, which is protected. I would say it's too narrow. There's other issues with that. But you know, this is probably as best as we're going to get in that situation. You have Parliament in the background. It kind of ticks the boxes there. The problem I have with all of this stuff is we can't protect every single location. There is intelligence that runs this, all sorts of predictions and things going on in the background. But if we were to do every single bridge in the country where you might have lots of people, it's the cost, it's the time and everything else. So that's probably where the bad is creeping in for this one for me. Hampton Court Bridge, another kind of temporary pop-up end of bridge route. So on the left here is actually a cycle track, which isn't particularly good in the first place. To the right, that line is the footway. The high curb there isn't actually anything to do with counter-terrorism. That was to protect the old bridge parapet on the right-hand side. But retrofitted bollards here, so again, these are stopping lorries getting through. And at the end, this type of arrangement is kind of pop-up temporary counter-terrorism, but it's very ugly. It's a bit of a pinch point for certain users, and it's uneven. So again, these kind of things need to be taken out and upgraded. again, lots of interesting photos of bollards. This is outside Tottenham Hotspur football ground, which is behind me where I took it. Again, another example of maybe slightly nicer bollards, but again, we've stuck them through the crossing. So what we're starting to do is just really ruin the street scene. We're making it more awkward for people. They don't really interfere with actual high capacity pedestrian flows as such, because the spacings are set to be compatible with that, but it's ugly and all the rest of it. You've got this high strength lighting column here with the push button. Again, counter-terrorism strength, it's going to stop a lorry, but it's been designed so you don't have any weak spots in this kind of ring of steel here. Midland Road outside St Pancras Station, probably a bit better because you've got the cycle tracks on both sides. So from a street scene point of view, the bollards there do blend into the background a little bit more. Nice wide zebra crossing, so the actual pedestrian flows again aren't particularly impacted. This is doing two jobs here. It's stopping anybody getting close to anywhere that people might be crowding, and it's stopping people getting a vehicle in to the station concourse there. This is an interesting one. This is up in Glasgow, so this is probably a slightly different approach to things. I'll come to this again in a second. So rather than having lines of bollards along streets, this is having a line of bollards across a street, and this essentially sterilises. It's an area around banking facilities. Immediately in the cycle track, you can see that the bollards are within the cycle track, so you've got this localised pinch point, and there is a tension. For those that know, the LTM 120 guidance talks about a 1.5 metre air gap between the bollards, and that's to make it accessible for all types of cycles. The counter-terrorism guidance says this air gap has to be 1.2 metres, which is probably fine for most people and most cargo bikes, but it's a potential issue for the biggest bikes. People like Pedal Me that use big trailers won't get through that. So there is a trade-off. The reason it's set at 1.2 is if it's any wider, smaller vehicles can be kind of crashed and barged through, and you lose the action of two bollards working at once. So that's been set after years of testing. It's going to be pretty much impossible to get the counter-terrorism people to change that advice. What you can see here, two bollards there with slightly different bases, they're the ones that move out the way for occasional access and maintenance or whatever. So quite interesting. Maybe that line of bollards is better than a bollard line along the street. So my issues with this is we're sterilising street layouts potentially. So once you put these expensive bollards in, you're kind of fixing that layout. There's impacts at crossings, as I've really shown here, bus stops and things like that. They're costly to install and maintain. That this stuff is not for free, and eventually local authorities will pick up the bill for lots of these things. Very, very expensive to change these round. Some of the newer kit is actually a bit easier to install. It's less intrusive into the road or the footway, so it's maybe a bit easier. No consultation on this. This is happening. It's mandated. The security forces have all the powers they want to do this stuff. We don't get a say. So we do talk about LTNs and consulting everybody to the nth degree and trying to keep everybody happy. There is no consultation. This stuff's going in. And that's probably, with law changes on the horizon, that's probably going to be made even more draconian, if I can put it that way. And actually, this is a permanent change to our daily life. So we now have people who have to cope with bollards in crossings. We've got the street scene impacts. We've got all this kind of stuff going on. Kind of some of these people, some of the terrorists may have won because we have changed how we go about our lives. And probably the last point to make on that is this actually a downstream solution to an upstream failure? A mere highways engineer can't deal with the causes of terrorism and everything that goes back up the food chain. But this is kind of road safety, isn't it, in the traditional sense? Let's go and do a thing because we've got a problem going on. So that's my issues with it. Now, I don't want to be completely negative about what this is for, because obviously this is about prevention of terrorism. It's stopping people getting hurt. You can't prove prevention or all of that. So from that point of view, there is a parallel to sustainable safety away from road safety. So let's look at a couple of interesting examples then. This is the Alhambra Theatre in Bradford. So those big planters, rocks and benches are all counter-terrorist installations. So again, all carefully designed to stop a truck been driven through there. Not quite sure about the gap with the tree. Trees won't help you, but those are doing a different job to bollards in terms of being somewhere to sit, somewhere to plant trees. So rather than just having a big block or big bollards, here's something that does a couple of things, which in my book is always good. If it does one job, great. If it does two jobs, even better. Let's look at Park Street in Windsor, up by the castle. Again, this was a quickly deployed scheme. They've come back in here. You've got these concrete barriers with benches on them. You've got this counter-terrorism bollards and a counter-terrorism planter. So again, if you've got to have this clutter, we might as well have it doing more than one job in the street there. So let's look at the positives then. The materials being used behind this and the technology is getting cleverer and cleverer. So the bollards are getting more slender, things looking more architectural. You can make them blend into the street scene. All sorts of things going on there, and gradually you'll see products released to the market which do some really good jobs. The security design advice is giving us more integrated solutions, so you can integrate them into landscaping and street furniture and stuff like that. So if it's designed from the start scheme, it works much better for everybody. And as I said, CP and I have some really good and interesting advice. I mean, go and read Hostile Mitigation Schemes for the Streetscape. Really interesting paper. The first thing they suggest is get the motor traffic out of the situation. And I think lots of us on this call would probably support that as being your first point of call. And hopefully there can be some discussion and resolution about this 1.2 meters versus 1.5 meters. And that's me. Thank you very much.
Wow, someone said from clowns to terrorism. That's quite a session we've had there. If anyone wants to ask Mark a question, do put your hand up, put it in the chat. Quick one from me, Mark, was the observations about trees. Can I just do you think trees are a solution or they aren't because they're not deemed sort of secure enough?
They won't stop a lorry loaded with explosives. So if you want to plant trees, put them in properly designed planters that will do the protection job. Trees on their own will not stop big vehicles and they're determined.
Great, thank you for the answer. Right, we've got two questions. I'll go to Graham first and then Adam.
Unmute. I was interested in the back end, all of it, but the back end points that Ranty was making about multi-use objects. My former colleague, the city engineer in Oxford, would tell our students years ago that there should be no traffic calming. There should only be devices that are useful for other people, like crossing over the road to a school on a raised crossover. And I think it's a bit shorthand, that, wasn't it? But I think it's an area that we don't talk enough about, how to make the implementations that you want to do legitimate, how to make them as legitimate as possible. And it's possibly an art, although making objects so they have at least two uses is a good starting point. Thanks.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, I think for me, one of the best, at least in London, one of the best things we've got is the bus stop flag, because I think that's got 7 or 8 different things going on with it. So I won't bore you with that. That's a whole separate talk. But yeah, if it does one job, fine. If it does 2 jobs, great. If it does 3 jobs, fantastic. Absolutely.
Yeah, just a quick one. When in Bath, they're in the process of putting in these rising bollards to secure the centre during the daytime when it's busiest. But one of the things that they're not doing, though, is I think there is some accessibility issues within that space, and they're not dealing with it in a kind of cohesive way. There's a lot of this sort of, because is there a problem with some of this sort of infrastructure that goes in where they don't actually fix, say, any of the drop curbs? They just say, look, we're going to stop these cars from coming into this space, but we're not going to put it in the drop curbs, smooth out, get rid of those cobbles, because wheelchair users can't now access that space very easily, whereas before they could drive in a, say, blue badge holder, they could be dropped off in the center of it and deal with it. That doesn't seem to be happening. In Bath, one of the studies, the Access report, basically highlighted that even with all of these bollards, rising bollards, visually impaired people and people in wheelchairs just couldn't use the space anyway, because the pavements are all over the place, steps into shops, and so accessibility hasn't been solved by just saying, hey, let's let blue badge holders in with their cars.
Yeah, agree with all of that. Yeah.
Bob, you got your hand up. Do you want to come in?
Yeah, okay. What on this question of moving bollards, what I noticed about the ones in the Strand is that they have these, apparently these horizontal ones that moving horizontally like Daleks, quite fun to look at. With regard to terrorism, I would have thought both ordinary bollards and moving ones might not be very effective, but that's not the point. What I wanted to ask you, since you've been talking about the normal moving bollards, the ones that move up and down, are we now going to be seeing these horizontal moving ones as well? Have you got any views on that?
I will find the link to the actual product for the one at the Strand, but they are counter-terrorism.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and the reason that that type of design was developed is simply because in that particular location, there's tons of utilities running through there. So you haven't got, well, there's two things. You haven't got the space to dig down without moving utilities out of the way, which is massively expensive. Plus, even if you did squeeze them in between the utilities and they got hit and wrecked by somebody, then the turning action of these things or getting broken in the ground can actually damage utilities as well. So it's kind of a double pronged thing. And as I said back in the presentation, technology is getting better, the techniques are getting better. So you're actually now getting some really slender solutions to the bollards. So the sliding ones, as you just said, the Dalek ones, again, are a response to a particular problem to try and deal with yeah, the depth, the issue, but also to make it secure. So yeah, it's quite interesting, and there's loads of stuff. Go onto CPNI's website, and there's lots of really interesting information. But there's also things, again, that you shouldn't be Googling, put it that way.
I mean, the thing is that you know, I'm not sort of really going off topic, but I'm saying if we have, if it is now fashionable and seen as being desirable in certain situations to have horizontally moving bollards, that's something that's going to be relevant to LTNs, isn't it? Because it sort of changes the way we discuss everything. You know, at the moment it's just ANPR or a fixed bollard. If you can get stuff in, I mean, there's expense questions because they need power, but that kind of changes the sort of issues, the ways in which we do filtering. Do you not think?
Yeah, I think there's a world of difference between trying to protect a railway station or a public square, where probably a lot of money's been invested into that particular space. If you start applying that to LTNs, I think the starting position is fixed bollards, because you're trying to stop the casual driver. What you're not doing in the LTN is trying to stop an attack necessarily. Although I have been in meetings where certain police have suggested, well, your LTN probably needs protecting, but that's a different matter. So it's down to risk and all sorts of stuff going on in the background. But I think even with the sliding bollards, it is a massive maintenance headache for local authorities. So you'll only see them on those prestige sites where there is a risk that we should be putting them in there, I think. I have just found the link, so I will stick that in the chat now. They're called Matador bollards.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for a really interesting chat. It certainly explained a lot of things about the streetscape that we see around us. And thanks for everyone for joining us this week. We've hit the end of the session. One final point from me is that we've actually got a last-minute vacancy next week for a speaker. We've had somebody had to defer to another slot. So if anyone has got an idea for a speaker, do let us know. I put our email address in the chat, and it could be you. If you've got an interesting research subject or presentation that you'd like to to talk to us. So please do email if you've got any suggestions. We have got a number of emails out to speakers for later in the session, but in the season, but we've got a vacancy, last minute vacancy for next week. So thanks to our speakers this week. Thanks to Carla. Thanks to Mark. Thanks to everyone for joining. As Ruth said in the chat, we're trying to get Rosina Chowdhury to come along and talk about the curbside park policy, which is set the active travel world alight with how good it is, and we all want one. So thanks everyone for joining. Please email us with your suggestions for speakers. See you next time.
I don't know if we want a small committee meeting, Ruth, Roxanne.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for everyone to leave probably.
Yeah.